right, we are here finally after a lot of Zoom techie issues. I have the extraordinary, powerful, divine masculine Matt Sturm. Sturm is a guide for transformational experiences and the co-founder of Embodied Erotic. His passion is to craft experiences and hold spaces that allow for the big love inside of each of us to emerge. He's trained in the Hakomi method of psychotherapy, a body-based therapy centered around mindfulness. He's a hatha yoga teacher and certified Tantra educator. His work is heavily inspired by his meditation and yoga practices. And he's been leading workshops and ceremonies for Neo-Tantra and sacred sexuality since 2014. And I want to say that in 2015, Matt and I did our Tantra training with Source Tantra. That's where we met. And actually, we have quite a few of people from that crew here this week.
Oh, awesome. Yep.
And yeah, I just remember seeing Matt like one of the first days, and he was right there with anyone who had an issue, and he was just showing up so fully. And I was like, this guy is the light. And I was so impressed by him and his energy. And yeah, so every time I get to spend time with Matt, I'm happy. And so I'm excited about talking to him today about a new paradigm for masculine sexuality. And so Matt, let's just dive right in. What is the deal with going on with masculine sexuality these days? What's the issue?
So first off, thank you, Sheza. What an amazing introduction, and such a pleasure to get to do this with you. Such a beautiful way to spend our day today, basically. And yeah, super passionate about masculine sexuality. So in the wake of the Me Too movement over the past several years, it's just been coming more and more to light that something's off, that the picture of masculinity that we have in our culture just isn't working. And you know, the term toxic masculinity gets thrown around a lot, and it's important for us to feel our anger and to feel like just the upset, the righteousness that this is not a paradigm that's working. And I like to go a layer beneath that to try to understand where this is coming from. So there's this theory in psychology that really carried a lot of weight for me when I read it. Basically, when we are small children, we are one unit with our mother. And as we grow and develop, a lot of that development is individuating. It's finding our own self separate from mothers. Now, for hetero cisgendered men, in addition to becoming a separate individual entity, we are also need to define what our masculinity is. And so often that happens in opposition to our mother, in opposition to the feminine. And that can show up either through putting down the feminine, saying I'm better than the feminine. It can come through fear or rejection of the feminine, or some of us feel very powerless vis-a-vis the feminine. But however it happens, we create this othering. And it's kind of a natural process that humans have to go through. But in other cultures, what happens is, like indigenous tribal cultures, is the little boys get taken away from the moms at a certain age and they go hang out with the men. And the men instill this cultural sense of what masculinity means for that culture. And there's a rite of passage from boyhood into manhood. We don't have any of that. So for me, that's like the root of where this is coming from, is we have no rite of passage into manhood, and we just have this broken othering system that happens for men.
Uh-huh. And so how is that created? What is that showing up as in our current culture?
Right, great question. So I teach events and workshops on sexuality. And so I'm less interested in the patriarchy at large. I'm more interested in sexuality and how that shows up. For the guys who I see coming to my workshops, we kind of land in two different buckets. One group of guys I call alpha guys, and they're guys who have their sexuality turned on. They have their turn on available to them, and they put that out there in the world. And what they're lacking is the attunement. What they're lacking is the feeling. And so often they come off as either disrespectful or unsafe in a space. The other side of that are the nice guys. They're the guys who see the patriarchy, who see these alpha guys out there, and they go, I don't want to be one of those guys. Mm-hmm. I am in my heart, and I'm sensitive, and I'm feeling, but by doing this, I've cut myself off from my own turn on, from my own penetrating masculine sexuality. And so I get kind of stuck in the friend zone, and I don't have access to really like the full sexual life force that's available to me. Mm-hmm. So that's what I see a lot of, is people coming in either on one side or the other.
Okay, and so in your work, how are you bridging these people back into their healthy masculinity?
That's a great question. So I love to talk about connecting the cock with the heart. And it doesn't matter whether you come in as an alpha guy and you're connected with your turn on and you need to make the bridge to your heart, to feeling and compassion, or if you come in feeling and sensitive and you need to make the bridge to your cock to get in touch with your sexual drive. What we want is both of these online so that you can essentially have your turn on sensitively, have your turn on with compassion so that you're feeling at the same time that you're bringing your sexuality.
Yeah, on behalf of all women, I'm saying yes to cock and heart uniting as one.
Right. Thank you.
So what can men do to move towards this?
So the practices are, number one, getting in touch with your authentic turn on outside of the sexual scripts that we've been handed to us by our culture. So by sexual script, I mean like this narrative or this pattern that we have, but really going inside and finding out like, what is my turn on just for me? And owning, this is my turn on. I turn myself on in these situations, right? And when we have ownership over that, then we can express it without, and this is like the really hard part, expressing it without expecting anything in return. Mm-hmm. So I can say to you, Sheza, you are ravishingly beautiful. And when I'm in your presence, like I just feel so much life force, right? Mm-hmm. And so I'm sharing that I have desire, that I'm turned on with you, but I don't need it to go anywhere. It's just like, here it is. I'm enjoying me being turned on in your presence, right?
Absolutely. And can I just say what a frequency that's coming alive for me as you say that is a playfulness. It's mm-hmm. like a man coming with a playfulness who's just owning his desires and also is like, can express them and be like, oh my God, you're hot, but it's like fun and playful. Without the neediness is mm-hmm. and the like grasping, whether that's coming from like the toxic way of a lot of men or it's coming from the nice guy, like, oh, I'm not, like both of those are not turn on. They're not a turn on. But if a guy is just owning who he is and he's fun and playful and flirty, it's like so hot.
Mm-hmm. Right. So when we drop our agenda for getting somewhere, for trying to get to sex or trying to get to relationship or whatever it is, and we just slow down and feel what's present here now, it makes all the difference in the world.
Yes. Yes. So I read this beautiful article that you wrote, which we will share. I would love it if you would share in the link afterwards on this video, because it's a
Yeah, happy to.
article around being devoted to the feminine.
Yeah.
Please explain how that looks.
So I am a tantrika. I love Tantra, which is kind of the spirituality of sex and devotion. And as you know, Sheza, one of the archetypes for the masculine is Shiva, and he brings devotion through his presence. And this is like a really powerful way for the masculine and feminine to interact. When the masculine shows up and is just like in awe of and love and devotion, like, oh, you are so amazing, and raises up the feminine through presence, through loving presence, basically, but also through sexual presence. Then the feminine just gets to blossom open and flourish, and her abundance flows forth. And it's this beautiful interplay that starts to happen. So the masculine, in his light, in his power, really is this sense of devoted presence towards the feminine.
Yum. But what I really want to know for the men is, why would that be something that they actually should for themselves do? Because of course, if you're just doing it for the woman, that's like gonna also get a little wonky as well. You also want to do it because it's good for you.
That's a great point. So I was talking about the interplay, but really, like, when I tap into this archetype, the archetype of Shiva, it takes me into just like this very centered place in myself. It's like this magical portal into my consciousness, like opening into solid, grounded, available openness. And my devotion is how my heart pours out through my eyes and my presence. And so just like getting to be in that is such a gift.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So really, like the devotion to the woman is more like an outpouring of your own power that you're already in.
Right.
So it's just like a natural thing that happens rather than something you have to go and try to do.
Right.
Was what I'm hearing.
Totally. And like all of us can cultivate devotion. I can see an amazing flower or nature and open my devotion towards that. But we're really focused here on sexuality and the interplay between the masculine and feminine. And that polarity between these two is a beautiful place to let that devotion pour forward.
Right, right. Devotion is just our natural state of being. It's like it's also like a little bit like gratitude. You're just like grateful and it's like the yummified embodied version of gratitude is devotion.
Right. That's 100% it. And what we're talking about here is raising all of us up to this higher level of being, to more dignity, to more consciousness. We get out of what can I get from this situation? What can I get from you? What can I win over or convince you of? And when we switch to devotion, now we're in more of a being state. And I am honoring and respecting you as another aspect of the divine, as another innately beautiful human being. And when we step into that, sex becomes sacred.
Yes. Sex isn't just about, like, sacred sex isn't just about lighting candles and making incense, although that's all great too. But this connected to your own divinity, your own presence, and your own yum, embodied yum, and then pouring that out into the other so that it just becomes this back and forth.
Right. And once you have that, so this is leading into one of my other favorite things. once you have that like I thou relationship where you're mutually connecting on a soul level, then sacred sex doesn't have to look like chanting mantras and, just like very quiet, slow, gentle. Like for me, the sacredness of sex is all flavors of sex. And that's one of the things that I love about Tantra. It can be dirty, it can be slutty, it can be powerful and strong, like passionate, whatever flows through. Like once you have that foundation of the soul level connection, then all of it gets to open up.
Yes. Yes. So, yum. Yes.
Yum, right? So this is what I'm advocating for what guys can do. So often we see, okay, here's what's wrong in the culture out there, and there's so many role models of what not to do right now, right? And then the question is, as a man who cares and who is starting to engage more consciously with his own sexuality, what can I do for me, right? So this paradigm is really about personal responsibility. Like, it's not about pointing fingers at what other people should do. It's how can I own and embody my sexuality more fully in a way that's uplifting to me and uplifting to all the people I'm engaging with.
And this also goes for the feminine or the female bodied people who can also feel a lot of blame and victim. It's like it's also women coming into that masculinity inside of themselves, where they get to own their own deliciousness as well. Is that
Totally.
about that at all?
So I have a few thoughts about that. First of all, masculinity is just an archetype, and we all have both masculine and feminine within us. And so women can tune into this aspect of holding space with loving presence and devotion just as much as guys with penises can. Like any person can step into that space, and it's a beautiful space to get to explore. The other thing is that, we're talking right now mainly from like a cisgendered hetero perspective. Masculinity for the queer and trans communities, it's a whole different dialogue, but it's still like there's so much richness there. And what I want to advocate for is not to like tear down all masculine and all feminine, but to really find where are the nuggets that are worth exploring and savoring. Like what's here that's worth keeping and playing with. Like I love that you brought playfulness in. So yeah, it's a broad exploration that we get to have, and seeing it as an exploration about learning more about me. Like I see my sexuality as this magical window to learn about myself. And sometimes it's shadow and sometimes it's light, but I'm constantly being like, wow, there's still more here. The more I'm willing to dig in and open.
Yes. And in terms of people who are queer, transgender, this group of the population, they also get to play, even if you have two men, they can also play this dynamic of masculine and feminine.
Right. Yeah. And sometimes it looks like dom and sub or top and bottom or whatever. There are all sorts of different ways to play with polarity. The thing is, then when one person holds one role and another person holds another role, like giver and receiver, it creates this spark. It's like two different sides of a magnet create attraction. And that really is where sexual desire comes from. We desire that which is mysterious, which is other, which we don't have or possess already ourselves.
Beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I just want to say that I see you as somebody who, I want to say, first of all, like I'm in my sister's basement right now. I'm moving tomorrow into like a much more scenic place.
Yeah, I love that poster. It's great.
Girl flipping us off.
Yeah. It's awesome.
Okay. So yeah, I just wanted to say that as well, like I just really see you as somebody who's holding that frequency for the planet, and I'm so
Mm.
appreciative of that in you, Matt. You're amazing.
Thank
And
you.
yeah, absolutely. And can you just please tell us, um, what would our world look like if more men were tapping into this?
Oh man, I love that question. And you touched on this a little bit earlier when you said, women get on their own side, they get stuck in feeling victimized. When men, so we're in a cycle right now where men are taking, or men are treating women like objects, and then women are receiving that violence in a certain way. And then they're in smallness, they're in victimhood. And it's like a vicious cycle. And so any one of us can break out of that cycle at any point. So if it's the women who become empowered and stand in their power, then great. And if it's the men who step into their presence and devotion, like that breaks the cycle either way. So then what happens is men own their sexuality, they express it without an agenda, and they bring their presence and devotion. Women, on the other hand, find their own sexual sovereignty, not as sexual objects, but in themselves. I am a sexual being. I get connected with my pleasure, with my bliss. Yes, Sheza, like you are so there. And then the feminine just blossoms open, and it's the source of life. It's the source of abundance. It is this like full, beautiful, flowing force of actual life in the world. And then the masculine, just gets to drink that in. And so we're moving out of fear. We're moving out of scarcity. We're moving out of blame and the victim, perpetrator, rescuer drama triangle. We get out of that paradigm, and then we start actually honoring, enjoying, uplifting each other. And it's more of like a celebration, right? And we create this culture that is creative, that is resilient, where our sex, which is our life force energy, gets to flow through us and interchange between us. And we harness that energy for what we're here to do in the world, which is to love more. So that's where we want to go.
Honey, I'm so on board with this plan. And I think everyone in this Facebook group in this Ecstatically Alive Summit is totally on board. So
Awesome.
yeah, let's just keep. What is one practice that the men could do today that you could recommend for them?
So one place to get started is to get in touch with your desire as it is originating from me and it is for me. My desire is mine. We call this sexual sovereignty. And the practice that I love to give to men that I coach is to start self-pleasuring with no porn and no fantasy, just touching your body. And without an agenda, like I don't have to get hard, I don't have to come, it doesn't have to be about that. But for guys to tune into my own pleasure and start to create that body level connection. And when we feel that, that starts to undo our agenda around, I need to connect with so-and-so, I need to have such and such experience in order to feel good.
Mm-hmm. Did you watch Aaron's video yesterday by chance?
I haven't.
Okay, you got to go and watch
it. Check it out. Is it good?
It's all about what you just talked about that.
Awesome.
For anyone who's watching this, they go right hand in hand. But I love that you're just really bringing that devotional quality and just talking about what this world could be like if it was a celebration of the masculine and the feminine, just in their power and in their joy and in their deliciousness, just celebrating life together.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my God.
Right?
Yes.
That's why I'm passionate about this work. And I know that you are too. Like, there is so much goodness here. And healing and like all the things, but like so much goodness. And what we all truly want deep down, this is what I really believe. We all want intimacy. We want intimacy with each other. We want intimacy with ourselves. And sex is this really powerful portal to intimacy. It can be if we use it responsibly. And so this is really also about all of us having more fulfilled relationships. Yeah.
Yes. Yay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, I'm a total yes to this. And yeah, I'm so grateful that we finally got on this live to work, because
it happened. We did it.
But we stayed totally chill and just waited for it to come back on in our pleasure. I was in my pleasure. I know you were too. And,
I feel from doing this interview, I feel ecstatically alive right now. And getting to come on and share this with you is such a gift for me. Like, how beautiful to get to actually tap into this space together when there's so much going on in the world out there right now.
That is exactly why I've created this, to raise the vibration through devotion, joy, yum, celebration, and all the goodness that we just all need and want. So thank you so much for being here, Matt. You're just an amazing example of a man. I love you. I can't wait to have Katie on. Matt's partner is Katie, and she's coming in a couple of days too, and she's super spectacular as well. So yeah. So thank you so much for being here, Matt. And yeah.
Love you, Cheza. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.